On Hill 123 in Korea, Corporal Mitchell Red Cloud Jr. is giving a nearby soldier an order that sounds impossible to survive. He wants to be tied to a tree. Chinese troops are emerging from the darkness. Behind him, his company is still trying to understand where the attack's coming from. Red Cloud had been their first warning, and he knows if he leaves the forward post now, the Chinese will reach the hill before the company is ready. So the soldier strips off his web belt and fastens the corporal upright against the trunk. Earlier that month, the 19th Infantry Regiment of the 24th Infantry Division had pushed north beyond the Chongchon River. But the farther the UN line advanced, the harder it became to keep every unit connected. One of the weakest openings sat between the 19th Infantry and the 27th British Commonwealth Brigade. The gap stretched about 5 miles. Patrols could not seal all of it. After dark, Chinese troops began slipping through the opening and following Allied telephone lines toward isolated positions. On the night of November 5th, 1950, they reached C Company first. The attack hit sleeping men before many understood what was happening. Men scrambled out of their bedding, reached for rifles, pulled on boots, and tried to locate firing in the dark. Some never made it out of their tents. Nearby, E Company held Hill 123. About 1,000 infantrymen of the Chinese 355th Regiment were moving toward the position to hit it the same way. Forward of the company, Corporal Mitchell Red Cloud Jr. manned a listening post with his assistant and a Browning automatic rifle. At about 3:20 in the morning, under a nearly full moon, movement emerged from the brush, less than 100 feet from the foxhole. Tied to the tree beside it, Red Cloud opened fire into the dark. Perry Woodley, the 2nd Platoon medic, woke to the sound of Red Cloud's rifle coming from the forward post. By the time he left his tent, the hill was coming awake under fire. Men were shouting in the dark. Wounded soldiers were calling for a medic. Just as it had happened to C Company, the direction of the attack was still being sorted out by men who had been asleep minutes before. Woodley moved forward to begin caring for the wounded. One of the first he reached was Red Cloud. When he arrived at his foxhole, the assistant BAR man had already been taken out by return Chinese fire, and Red Cloud had been shot twice in the chest. The Browning automatic rifle, or BAR, fired the same .30-06 round as the M1 Garand, but in automatic bursts from 20-round magazines. With the assistant gone, Red Cloud had to fire, reload, and control the weapon alone, while bleeding from the chest. Woodley dressed the wounds and prepared to remove Red Cloud from the exposed post. Red Cloud refused to move. He was badly wounded, but he was still conscious, alert, and capable of working the BAR. Behind them, the company was forming a defense, while the Chinese pressed the hill. If Woodley stayed with Red Cloud, those men would be left waiting while the fight moved around them. So Woodley left the foxhole and moved back toward the other casualties. As he did, he heard the BAR open behind him. Every burst gave the company more time to wake up, find weapons, drag wounded men back, and build a line in the dark. Then Red Cloud was hit again and called for aid. When Woodley came back, the chest wounds were no longer the only problem. His body was failing under repeated hits. The medic expected to treat him further than basic wound dressing, maybe even pull him out if he could. Instead, Red Cloud refused further help. He understood his fire was holding the attack in place, long enough for the men behind him to recover. Once again, he told Woodley he was more useful with the other wounded, and Red Cloud was staying with the gun. So the medic moved away again, and the BAR fired up again behind him. It's impossible to know exactly what Red Cloud thought war would be like when he asked his father for permission to join the Marine Corps at 16. On August 11th, 1941, Pearl Harbor was still nearly 4 months away, but he left high school and chose a path into the Pacific War. By 1942, he was with Carlson's Raiders, the 2nd Marine Raider Battalion, in Weapon Platoon F Company. That November, he landed with the Raiders at Aula Bay on Guadalcanal. 2 days later, they moved into the jungle on the 28-day-long patrol, hunting Japanese artillery, firing on Henderson Field, cutting communication lines, destroying supplies, and fighting through the island's interior. The patrol disposed of nearly 500 Japanese soldiers and cost the battalion 19 men killed and 122 wounded. Red Cloud survived, but malaria, jaundice, and tropical disease nearly finished what bullets had not. He lost about 75 pounds and was sent home for medical evaluation. Navy doctors in San Diego offered him a medical discharge. Red Cloud refused it. When he recovered, he asked to return to combat, and later joined A Company, 29th Marines, 6th Marine Division. On Okinawa, on May 17, 1945, he was shot in the shoulder and evacuated to Guam. He left the Marine Corps as a sergeant on November 9, 1945. After World War II, Red Cloud went back to Wisconsin, married, and had a daughter. For a man who had already given years to war, that could have been enough. But in 1948, he joined the Army. Since he changed branches, he could not keep the Marine sergeant rank he'd earned. He was assigned to E Company, 2nd Battalion, 19th Infantry, 24th Infantry Division. The unit was on occupation duty in Japan, stationed on Kyushu. The Army Red Cloud joined was not the same one that had ended World War II. It had been cut down hard after 1945. The United States had reduced the Army to 10 divisions. Training opportunities were limited. Many soldiers had little field experience. Equipment had been kept going under post-war budget cuts. It was a force built well enough for occupation duty, but Korea demanded something very different. Gear that had worked for guard posts, drills, and routine service was suddenly being used in long movements, bad weather, rough roads, and combat. The units needed veterans, tough field training, and room to learn. They were short on all three. Red Cloud would have noticed the difference quickly. He was only in his mid-20s, but compared with many of the men around him, he was already experienced in combat. A lot of the younger soldiers still hadn't seen how quickly a quiet position could become a fight at close range. Then, on June 25, 1950, North Korea crossed the 38th parallel. Since the 24th Infantry Division was one of the closest American divisions to Korea, it was rushed into the fight. Red Cloud's unit left Japan on July 3rd and entered a war that was already moving badly. The first months were full of emergency battles and retreats as American and UN forces were pushed back until the sea was nearly behind them. Surrounded by all this, officers and enlisted men looked up to Red Cloud because he'd already seen combat with his own eyes. He was considered a steady and dependable guide. He was also remembered for trading rations for candy and giving it to Korean children. Red Cloud saw the people around him and cared for them. That's why, during the attack on Hill 123, he was ready to give his life for them. But after receiving several shots and losing blood, Red Cloud could no longer trust his legs. The BAR was not getting any lighter and still had to be held, aimed, reloaded, and controlled by him alone. With his body failing, he knew it would be a matter of time before he gave in. He ordered a nearby soldier to strip off his own web belt and fasten him to the tree. The soldier fixed him upright against the trunk, allowing the tree to take his weight. This way his hand stayed gripping the weapon, and the gun kept firing. Behind him, E Company was finally starting to fight as a unit again. Men were firing back, pulling wounded soldiers away from the exposed ground and tightening the defense. When the hill could no longer be held cleanly, they began a fighting withdrawal toward fortified ground about 1,000 yards south of Hill 123. Red Cloud, meanwhile, stayed at the forward post tied to the tree. He was struck as many as 8 times before he lost his life. As his body was recovered the next day, he was still tied to the tree, with the gun close to his hands. In April 1951, Mitchell Red Cloud Jr. was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, presented to his mother by General Omar Bradley at the Pentagon. Decades later, The Navy named a Watson-class vehicle cargo ship after him, the USNS Red Cloud. At its 1999 christening in San Diego, Kenneth Kershaw, one of the E Company men who had been on Hill 123, was there too. During the ceremony, he simply said, quote, "If it were not for the alarm sounded by Mitchell Red Cloud, I would not be here today."